Hey, this is Rob with my first 5-minute book review where I try to review a book in 5 minutes. Today's nonfiction book is Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Since this is my first review, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what I'm going to be doing with these. So first, I'm just going to give a brief synopsis. I don't like spending 10 minutes talking about something you haven't read yet in terms of the plot or whatever. Then I'll give a discussion, so some things I found interesting, some questions to think about, and then finally the benefits. I don't use any kind of arbitrary rating system like stars or thumbs up, because ultimately we can always get something out of any book. We can get some sort of benefit from it. So I don't want to say good, bad, because that just kind of erases a lot of the interesting stuff that can go on. So first, what is this book about? The question that he's asking, wants to answer is, why did Eurasia dominate the Americas, Africa, and Australia? Why not vice versa? So for instance, why was it Europeans that went to the quote-unquote New World and dominated indigenous populations with their technology, their germs, and so on, and why not the other way around? So the reasons he gives, well, the first kind of level of reasons are proximate causes, so guns, germs, and steel of the title, right? So Europe has guns, germs, and steel to dominate. There's other things too. There's writing, political centralization, technology general, especially warfare, and increased populations. But really that just pushes the problem back, right? Okay, then why did Europe have all of these different features and not the Americas and other places? And so the ultimate cause then is food production. So they can both grow plants and domesticate animals. This leads to increased populations. This leads to be able to support populations that don't have to make food, so warriors, scientists, scribes, and so on. And what leads to certain areas of the world having better food production is geography. So certain areas of the world, so Eurasia in particular, have more domesticated, or more plants and animals that can be domesticated. There's also a question of the axes of the world. So Eurasia has an east-west axis, while the Americas and Africa have a north-south axis. And what this means is that agricultural practices and technology and ideas and culture can diffuse more easily across east-west rather than north-south due to problems of latitude and climate. So that's kind of the basic idea. So some discussion. So this is clearly a very ambitious book. He's taking archaeology, anthropology, history, linguistics, biology, evolutionary biology, and he's really trying to answer a very big question, which a lot of historians, have trouble answering really big questions like this. So the critique that you always hear, that he glosses over details, he's missing this part of the theory. Yeah, of course. I mean, every book is going to have it's going to have pieces missing. It's not going to cover everything. So I find that kind of weak. And I think one of the great things is a much needed corrective against kind of racial and Eurocentric explanations for why Europe dominated. Things maybe you'll find sort of like in the bell curve. Whites are more smart, or are smarter, or better in certain ways than blacks and Asians, so on and so forth. That's why they dominate. Of course, this is a book that kind of debunks that to a certain extent. But of course, there's some problems when you go so hardcore geographically determinist, and by determinist we mean, if you have the input of geography, you always by necessity get the output of, either being a dominator or dominated. And you can see where this assumption breaks down with the case of China. So the first question, well, what about China? China had a huge advantage over Europe for pretty much all of its history until maybe the last few centuries of the previous millennium, but nonetheless has kind of fallen behind. What are the reasons for that? Granted, he uses this category of Eurasia instead of Europe and Asia to erase this question. That's not really his question, so it's not exactly a criticism, but it's still something we can think about, especially given how the rise of China is so important for us today. The second question is, well, if we're going to reject determinism, if geography is not 100% destiny, then what's going to replace it? So where's the contingency? And I think part of the answer here is going to be in culture, particularly in local cultures. This is a global story, but what happens if we kind of shrink it down and focus in on the kind of interactions between different cultures? Instead of taking, what he takes is kind of a purely almost social Darwinist or Darwinist kind of viewpoint, which is cultures are going to replace others because they can reproduce themselves better, and that's going to be, he grounds that, of course, in geography. And then finally, the third question, he brings this up briefly, but of course, this isn't a criticism because this is not his point in the book, but kind of the moral and ethical issues. How does something like this affect our policy when it comes to dealing with the third world? And how do we, what do we do with this knowledge? I mean, is it going to be a fact of history or something more? So finally, the benefits. If you're at all interested in archaeology, anthropology, global history, biology, evolutionary biology, you're going to want to read this book. It's pretty much required. Second, if you want to understand kind of geopolitics, the way the world is today, if you're interested in colonialism, imperialism, this is clearly a book for you. And then finally, just for the general reader, it won the Pulitzer Prize, so you always know that's going to be a good book coming out of it. Well, anyway, there'll be more reviews coming out soon, so please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more, and thanks for watching. Bye.